The face in the clouds. Our observatory received word about a meteorological anomaly in Himachal Pradesh, India. While our satellites didn't pick up anything out of the ordinary, the frequency and diversity of the reports suggested something was, indeed, amiss. Further, the crowdsourced pictures and video of the area, all taken and sent by cellular phones, were all corrupted beyond recognition. Whatever it was these people were seeing, you had to be there to get a glimpse. As I was stationed on a military base in Afghanistan and about 3 hours away by jet, I was chosen to investigate. One quick flight to a local airport and a short helicopter ride later, I was on the ground at the site of the anomaly. The meteorological disturbance was gone. The sky was clear and the late afternoon sun cast a warm orange glow on the orchards and farms at the foot of the mountains. That glow was the only warmth to be found. The locals who'd seen the anomaly were uncharacteristically quiet. I'd heard from folks familiar with the area that the people here were normally gregarious and outgoing. These people were the opposite. They were taciturn and skittish. Moreover, they were unwilling to discuss what they'd seen that morning. They spoke about the incident as if it'd been a trauma. More often than not, their eyes teared up when my translator mentioned it. I did my best to glean any bits of information that I could, but my success rate was low. The most I was able to learn came from a little girl, who, in the course of recalling the incident, burst into tears as she mentioned a face in the clouds. She would give us no more information after that. The translator and I decided to call it a night and checked into our hotel. It was small but pleasant enough. The meal that was included was sumptuous, albeit a bit spicier than I'd been expecting. As we ate, it was hard not to notice the quietness of the dining room. Despite all 8 tables being filled with diners, few words were spoken. Many tears, however, were shed. It felt like a great tragedy had occurred, yet no one was willing to admit what, exactly, had happened. At my suggestion, the translator was able to eavesdrop on a few commonalities in the brief, quiet conversations going on around us. They all talked about having intense discomfort with having to wait for so long. There were nods of resignation and more tears. Still unable to put anything into a coherent, let alone meteorological, context, we decided it would be best to retire to our room and try again the next day. Our sleep was taken from us in the early hours of this morning. It was still dark, but there was a buzz of activity in the streets. We left our room and went outside. We recognized people from dinner and from the businesses we'd stopped in the previous day. In the glow of the streetlights, I could see their faces were all wet with tears. They wept and moaned, and the translator, with some alarm in his voice, told me they were conducting a slow, disorganized countdown. They had just reached 10 seconds. I stared at the translator for a moment, trying to put it all together, but there just wasn't enough. Nothing made sense. Then, as the first sliver of sunlight crested the mountains, the screaming started. Women, children, and men, in unison, shrieked with sorrow and pain and desperation and clasped their hands to their eyes. My panic, already growing in my chest, began to bloom as blood trickled down their screaming faces. As more sunlight filled the street, the intensity of the hideous wailing grew. When it reached a point when voices were beginning to give out and people were falling to their knees, a cloud passed in front of the sun. Every scream was silenced. Faces drenched with tears and blood began to smile. Hands were lowered to sides. Now it was I who shouted. Their eyes were destroyed. It looked as if they had burst. From what, I had no idea. The translator, who'd been looking at the sky, gasped. I started to turn my gaze in the direction he was looking, but he grabbed my head with great force and pushed it down toward the ground and the faces of the terribly disfigured people who still smiled with their faces turned skyward. "Don't," he shouted. He inhaled a lungful of air and exclaimed, "Now I know what they saw." The panic and concern in his voice was combined with something else. Something far more disturbing. It was ecstasy. "Oh my God," he cried, over and over and over, still holding my head in a vice grip to prevent me from looking up. I'd lost my desire to do so. In fact, something else had claimed my attention. The gaping holes in the faces of the townsfolk had started projecting strings. Fleshy, red filaments slinked down their faces, but then perked upward and became erect. More and more length poured out and stretched outward and up. I couldn't see where, but I had a feeling. "They're getting to touch him," whispered the translator. "He is letting them inside." His voice cracked and his next words were punctuated by sobs. "They're tasting him with their eyes." I scanned the faces of the people in front of me. Their smiles were rapturous and the thin tendrils pulsed and quivered and gently pulled their heads forward. The sky brightened. All at once, the ropes fell from the sky. They draped over me and the translator and the townsfolk fell on their faces into the street. The sun broke through the clouds. None of the fallen people moved. The translator released my head and I spun around and looked into the cloudless sky. I directed my gaze down and saw what had to be miles of red, meaty tendrils stretched across the roads and rooftops all the way to the mountain. Finally, I looked at the translator. He was weeping. I asked him to tell me what he saw. "The face in the clouds," he told me. "The face that lets eyes taste him." He wept for a minute without interruption before speaking up. "There is so much more I wanted to see with my old eyes. So many more sights. But my new eyes will allow to taste so much more than I've ever been able to see. All I have to do is wait." Flies began to investigate the bodies in the dirt, landing on the gaping eye sockets and extruded filaments. My thoughts wandered to what I should do next. The translator sobbed next to me and began counting down from 85,000. The number of seconds until the next sunrise, I realized. More and more flies descended on the corpses and tasted the townsfolk with their feet. As the translator counted down with breathless anticipation, my fear grew into something monstrous and unexpected: curiosity. Curiosity and desire. I tried to taste with my eyes once, but I was asked to leave that Applebee's. And the Lord said, "I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion." "But," he said, "you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live." Sounds like they're seeing something much more sinister and Lovecraftian. The way angels are described in a lot of the Old Testament is very Lovecraftian horror-esque. Indeed, but strangely my parents acted like they'd never heard of that before when they started trying to proselytize to me again. Strange. How are they described? The descriptions vary widely, but include rings within rings eternally ablaze, things with 6 wings and 4 heads, things with numerous eyes, etc. Try reading Ezekiel sometime. Didn't look very hard, but didn't find anything in Ezekiel. Revelations though. 6 And before the throne there was a sea of glass like unto crystal, and in the midst of the throne, and round about the throne, were 4 beasts full of eyes before and behind. 7 And the first beast was like a lion, and the second beast like a calf, and the third beast had a face as a man, and the fourth beast was like a flying eagle. 8 And the 4 beasts had each of them 6 wings about him, and they were full of eyes within, and they rest not day and night, saying, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, which was, and is to come. 9 And when those beasts give glory and honor and thanks to him that sat on the throne, who liveth forever and ever. Now that's some cool shit. All angels are terror. Ezekiel's inaugural vision. 4 I looked, and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal. 5 And in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. In appearance their form was human. 6 But each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. 7 Their legs were straight, Their feet were like those of a calf and gleamed like burnished bronze. 8 under their wings on their 4 sides they had human hands. All 4 of them had faces and wings, 9 and the wings of one touched the wings of another. Each one went straight ahead, they did not turn as they moved. 10 their faces looked like this, each of the 4 had the face of a human being, and on the right side each had the face of a lion, and on the left the face of an ox, each also had the face of an eagle. 11 such were their faces. They each had 2 wings spreading out upward, each wing touching that of the creature on either side, and each had 2 other wings covering its body. 12 each one went straight ahead. Wherever the spirit would go, they would go, without turning as they went. 13 the appearance of the living creatures was like burning coals of fire or like torches. Fire moved back and forth among the creatures, it was bright, and lightning flashed out of it. 14 the creatures sped back and forth like flashes of lightning. 15 as I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. 16 this was the appearance and structure of the wheels, they sparkled like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel intersecting a wheel. 17 as they moved, they would go in any one of the 4 directions the creatures faced, the wheels did not change direction as the creatures went. 18 their rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around. 19 when the living creatures moved, the wheels beside them moved, and when the living creatures rose from the ground, the wheels also rose. 20 wherever the spirit would go, they would go, and the wheels would rise along with them, because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. 21 when the creatures moved, they also moved, when the creatures stood still, they also stood still, and when the creatures rose from the ground, the wheels rose along with them, because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. 22 spread out above the heads of the living creatures was what looked something like a vault, sparkling like crystal, and awesome. 23 under the vault their wings were stretched out one toward the other, and each had 2 wings covering its body. 24 when the creatures moved, I heard the sound of their wings, like the roar of rushing waters, like the voice of the Almighty be like the tumult of an army. When they stood still, they lowered their wings. 25 then there came a voice from above the vault over their heads as they stood with lowered wings. 26 above the vault over their heads was what looked like a throne of lapis lazuli, and high above on the throne was a figure like that of a man. 27 I saw that from what appeared to be his waist up he looked like glowing metal, as if full of fire, and that from there down he looked like fire, and brilliant light surrounded him. 28 like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, so was the radiance around him. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. When I saw it, I fell face down, and I heard the voice of one speaking. Far too much sunshine. Sounds a bit like the fungus that makes ants into zombies, only way more creepy. Love it? I'm from the Boeing Emergency Aeronautical Response Services. I'd like more information as well as a location is possible. I'd like to send one of our UAVs in. Gross. Classic IIA. Keep that shit up. Our eyes are yet to open. Fear the old blood. This is one of my favorites, and also I think this would belong under the log of anomalous events in the SCP Foundation site or as an actual SCP. Obviously Keter class. I wonder if fleshy tendrils growing out of people's eyes counts as body horror. I'd say definitely. Kind of a step down sort of thing, I guess. They're IIA's comfort zone, remember. Has it been a week yet or no? Edit, forgot IIA said all month, not a week. Sorry about that. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment Reddit Story Time for more Reddit stories.